Welcome to the Mio on MMA podcast. I'm your host, Mio, and we're somewhere in the episode 70s at this point of the podcast. If you're consuming it on the podcast apps, if you're on YouTube, oh my lord, how many videos do I have up there? The answer is a ton. But we are going to be talking today about Bellator 290, aka Fedor's Last Dance, which happened last Saturday, and UFC Vegas 69, UFC Road to the UFC Finals, UFC Lewis versus Spivak, which also took place on Saturday. I'm doing this one a little bit late. It was my birthday on Monday. So obviously there was family stuff, there was friend stuff, there was so on. And I did not get around to watching the fights I missed. And not even all of them, because I still haven't checked out the Neiman Gracie fight. I still haven't checked out the Jornal Lugo versus Jalen Bates fight from Bellator, which I kind of want to take a look at. I'm probably not going to look at the Neiman Gracie one. I don't need to see Gracie win a decision. But Jalen Bates was a guy I kind of soured on after his split decision with Mark Coates. So the fact that he went out there and beat Jornal Lugo, who's not a bad fighter by any means, is kind of interesting. You know, Lugo is a guy who, yes, lost to Danny Sabatello, but as boring and as frustrating as Sabatello is, he's a pretty decent fighter. The win over Brian Moore is kind of good win. So, and the win over Cass Bell is okay as well. So, like, there's a ton of stuff there that leads me to believe that, you know, that's a fight worth looking at. But I haven't done that yet. And I didn't think I would have time in this podcast to really talk about it all that much. And plus, you just kind of got what I thought already. Let's cover three items before we get into the fights. Sayub Kakramanov is apparently being released from the UFC, not by request, but by the UFC's own volition, despite having gone 2-1 and was winning the fight with Said Nurmagomedov up into the point where he got submitted. It's very weird. He's saying on social media, like, it feels like they thought I was going to lose, and that's what they brought me in. I don't get this. There's got to be more to this story somewhere, to be honest, because in this day and age, the UFC loves its Eastern European fighters, the former Soviet Union fighters, Dagestanis, Uzbeks, Kazakhstan, etc. They've created this sort of aura around them of, like, kind of just like touching base with Habib gives them, like, something. So it is very weird to see this cut. I hope he lands on his feet somewhere because he's a good fighter. He's a very good fighter. Michael Chandler and Conor McGregor are apparently going to be the coaches on Tough. I guess it's a good move. Like, I mean, if you want to get people to watch Tough, I guess Conor McGregor is how you do it. I'm not, truth be told, I wouldn't be interested in Tough, kind of honestly, regardless of what coaches we got. Actually, you know what? I'll take the back. The irony of Tough right now is that probably the thing that would actually interest me the most, legitimately, would just be like seeing them do like a inside the camp type deal. Like you bring in a team from American Top Team or AKA or whatever big super gym, and you have them work with regional fighters and give us like just a look at that. That probably would be more interesting, to be honest, than anything else. But hey, that's it. And we're going to talk real quick here about Bellator pay. So every time I talk about UFC pay, I'm usually talking specifically about the UFC. Admittedly, I'm ignoring the other promotions, because all of the problems I have with them are different to UFC. So let's get this straight. Because we have Bellator pay numbers, 100K for Ryan Bader, 150K for Eblen, 150K for Fedor, and people are throwing it out like, aren't you, all you guys who critique UFC fighter pay, are you going to critique Bellator fighter pay because it's lower? And here is the excuse, the catch-all, the rational defense of Bellator pay. You ready for this? Sit down, grab a piece of paper, take notes. It's going to be really short. Bellator does not make anywhere near the money the UFC does. Bellator controls, on rough average estimates, probably about 5% of American MMA revenue. UFC controls about 90%, and 10% is PFL, Bellator, regional promotions. Okay? That's the problem here. Bellator would have to pay. Well, no, I'm not even gonna put numbers to it because, to be honest, the gross difference here is huge. We're talking about a company that makes 18-1 on a revenue ratio to Bellator. UFC 18-1 Bellator. Do I think that MMA fighters in general should be paid more? Absolutely. You're taking, and this goes for boxers, this goes for kickboxers, this goes for Muay Thai, whatever. You are taking tremendous physical damage, CTE, etc. With what we know about the brain and the trauma that fighting and combat sports and contact sports generate for it, the payment should be so much higher everywhere. The difference here is that the UFC makes money. Bellator, number 2 promotion in America, doesn't. They were profitable in 2019 for the first time ever, and probably haven't been profitable since. That's the difference. You're not comparing dollar to dollar because you can't. The size that we are talking about here is not remotely the same. So let's talk about the cards and get into it. So let me talk about both the main events because at the same time, because both the main events have some interesting stuff, and I want to give them time, and I don't want to rush it. In the UFC Vegas 69, Derrick Lewis lost to Sergey Spivak, basically in what I call the wash cycle fight. Spivak was able to get Lewis down. He was able to pass guard. Lewis was able to stand up because he has that unique, well, not unique, but that ability to just get up and kind of bench press his way out of bad situations. It's all physical. It's not necessarily grappling technique or talent. It's the ability to just remain calm and just work your way out of it. And Spivak would take him right back down. In fact, there was a particular takedown where he basically face planted Lewis back into the mat on a mat return. I think he did that twice, actually. And that was something that Spivak does that realistically you do not see any other heavyweight do in the UFC. Because if you look at the other grapplers in the UFC, Marcin Tybura is like a pure grinder. Romanov is a pure power grappler, as in he takes you down and like immediately attacks. There's not a consistent over and over threat. And then Curtis Blades is just way more controlled and way more confident, and also way more confident in his hands. It also uses low shot takedowns, which are more risky. Whereas Spivak, it's upper body, trips, throws, etc. And Lewis also is at fault here because he engaged in the clinch with Spivak. Spivak represents a unique challenge that I just never thought Derrick Lewis was actually that capable of handling. Derrick Lewis is very capable of handling a grappler. I want to be clear on that. He's very capable of handling a heavy, heavy wrestler. But what he's not capable of doing is handling the pace that Spivak was going to bring to him. So I was very proud of this pick. And now the two weird things coming out of this is, one, people are acting like this is a possibly awakening of what Spivak can do. I don't think it really is. Like, it's a cool win. It gets him notoriety. If he gets him a bigger fight, cool. I'm down for it. But like realistically, I actually still think Sergey Spivak is the same guy he was before the fight. Obviously, that's partially because I picked him, but like outside of I thought he would get to a dominant position and just and punch Lewis to a stoppage. He got a submission instead. Aside from that, this was exactly what I expected. So I didn't have any kind of Spivak awakening moment with this. And then with Derrick Lewis, people are talking about, all right, well, is this the fight that really makes me think he's done? I was kind of already there. I just think that he's getting kind of old and he's taken a lot of punishment. Like, that's what it comes down to. He's not the same physical force, and notably, he's not nearly as durable as he used to be. That's, in my opinion, what this just comes down to. For next opponents, because I always like to do the matchmaking, Spivak Jailton Almeida is the fight that, to me, makes a lot of sense. We have Almeida, who we're kind of wondering what happens if he faces a solid physical grappler, which Spivak is. And with Spivak, there is the question of what happens if you run into a guy who has a more complete game on his back and an ability to wrestle you back, because he did lose to Marcin Tybura. And Jailton Almeida is like a way more physically amped version of that. What happens? And for Derrick Lewis, I'm going to go with the lazy one and talk about a fighter that fought on this card, Blago Ivanov. Why? Because Derrick Lewis is still a guy, like, that's a fight that Derrick Lewis would have historically won. Ivanov is a consistent but not particularly high power or pace striker. He'll fight at Lewis's level. He is actually a really good grappler, but he doesn't really implement it at all. And he's really durable. So, can Lewis knock him out? Can Lewis win a decision? Can Lewis win the type of fight that he really, really should? Because no longer do I want to see him against the young killers, the Spivaks, the Tai Tuivasas, the Sergey Pavloviches. Let's go back and, senior circuit this a little bit. With a fight that has freshness to it still. And then in the pride side of things, or not pride, well, kind of pride side of things, Bellator 290, Fedor just basically steamrolled, steamrolled Fedor. He knocked him down and GMP'd him. There's not much to say about the fight. It was kind of like the first fight, to be honest. Not really much to say there. But I will say that what I will say is this has resurfaced the whole idea of, like, was Fedor the greatest heavyweight of all time? Was he the greatest heavyweight in the world? And of course, Dana White has to pop his head up and go, well, he never fought in the UFC. He never chested himself, never went with that competition. Here's the thing. If you don't believe Fedor is the all-time GOAT of heavyweight, we don't really have a problem. GOAT is incredibly subjective. You're talking about, even to a degree, like, what does that mean? To some people, that just means, like, the best fighter. Take a prime fighter, have him fight, and that's the GOAT. Others look at legacy, transformation. There's so much there that it's hard to say. But here's the thing. During Fedor's Pride heavyweight title run, he was absolutely the best heavyweight in the world. And anyone who argues this point is just wrong. And there are a lot of people arguing it. And here's why it's just wrong. People will say, well, it wasn't in the UFC. Okay. Who were the UFC champions at the time? Rico Rodriguez, who faded out of the UFC and actually went over to Pride and then got fat. He was not the greatest heavyweight in the world. Tim Sylvia, who Fedor beat, still in his prime. Andrei Arlovsky, who Fedor beat, still in his prime. Frank Mir, who Fedor beat. Now, admittedly, Frank Mir and him were both way past prime. But, I mean, at the same time, do you really think Frank Mir, before he took fighting seriously, actually beats Fedor? Actually is the greatest heavyweight? The guy who gassed out against Ian Freeman is the greatest heavyweight in the world? No. And then we get into Randy Couture. That's a fight that both of them wanted and never got. And then you get into like freaking Nogueira, who again Fedor beat. I think honestly, in terms of the UFC, until Cain Velasquez's rise to prominence, Fedor was the best heavyweight in the world, and there was no actual debate about it. You have to get to the Cain Velasquez point to even have an argument. And by that point, also, Fedor was starting to fade. So, like, even if he had come to the UFC, lost to Cain Velasquez, I'm not sure how much that would have proved. And not for nothing, Strikeforce had, even during the UFC Strikeforce battle, which was Fedor's late prime, you still had a better heavyweight division in Strikeforce. You had Sergey Haratonov, you had Alistair Overeem, you had Fabricio Verdum, you had Bigfoot Silva. You had Alistair Overeem and Bigfoot would both go on to be title contenders in the UFC. Verdum, a title winner. You still had Andrei Arlovski there. You had Josh Barnett, a pair of former UFC champions. You had Daniel Cormier coming up in the world through there. So, yeah, no. This is a debate that really just shouldn't even have oxygen at this point. I don't talk about what Bellator does next because often there's not a lot of logic to it, and like they also like to do GPs, and I don't know what the plans for the GPs are, and their roster is constantly changing, and people are hopping the line because of that's how they got to do it. They don't have a positional advantage over anyone. They're much smaller than UFC, like we said, so it's whatever Scott Coker thinks will make the most money. If they get Francis Ngannou, that's the fight. Bader did nothing to sell that, which also, here's another thing. While I'm talking about Ryan Bader on the Bellator pay aspect, Bellator also allows their fighters to go out and have pretty much carte blanche to get sponsors and auxiliary sources of income, something the UFC used to do and no longer does. If you listen to an interview of Bader, I'm not entirely sure you really want to, because Bader will not talk about fighting all that much when he's on a podcast. But what he will talk about is the business of his sponsors, and he will absolutely make sponsors want to sponsor him because you have a Bellator champion who 100% will talk about your product as opposed to promoting the Bellator brand, as opposed to promoting his own fighting career. Dude realizes how to make the money outside of the UFC, and that's something that Bellator gives fighters that the UFC actively has been taking away. Okay, let's move on to the next fight on the UFC card, because we'll get UFC out of the way first. If you're here for the UFC, let's do that. Da Un Jung, Devin Clark. This was a stupid fight. From Jung's point of view, Clark 100% deserved to win. He did what he needed to do. Jung was willing to clinch with him, actively would clinch with him, tried to throw him a couple times, did not work. And Clark was able to force him into a grinding clinch battle, takedown, got some nice top control at the end of the first round, landed some ground and pound. Second and third round were kind of the same, and it was just frustrating. It was just frustrating because I do kind of think Da Un Jung can be a good fighter. He was a big favorite in this fight. I picked him pretty easily. And dude fought just the dumbest fight possible that you can fight against Devin Clark. And for Devin Clark, that gets him a win. This is a fight that is in no way actually fits with his position, because he's just coming off a win here, and I'm about to pick a guy in a losing streak. But does anyone else want to see Devin Clark versus Ion Cutelaba? Like, does that not feel like the fun? Like, if someone's going to fight Devin Clark's fight against him, I would love to see Ion Cutelaba do that. Like, it's the only interesting fight for me involving Devin Clark. And for Da Un Jung, I've got Ihor Potieria. We might as well try to do something with Potaria's shine off of Shogun. I guess you could feed him to Carlos Ulberg. I guess you could feed him to Kennedy Njoku. I guess you could feed him to other up-and-comers, but I don't know. Da Un Jung does feel like the guy who actually has a lot of potential and just isn't really doing it, and that would be a chance for him to style. Marcin Tybura versus Blago Ivanov. Tybura managed to basically just get a volume edge in the first round. Ivanov was setting down on the counter, probably a little bit too much, wasn't active enough. Typical Ivanov performance, honestly. And I gave Tybura the first round. I gave Ivanov the second round because Ivanov started doing like that triple power jab thing he likes to do. Boom, boom, boom. It was closing the gap. It was letting some things in. He was able to get some stuff going. Added some excellent body work. Definitely hit cleaner and harder than Tybura was. And he staggered him like 2 or 3 times. So I gave him that round, and then Tybura gave him the third round. Not much to talk about on that fight. It was kind of what it was. It was two guys that we absolutely at this point very much know exactly what they are. And they fought exactly like we expected them to. I had picked Ivanov. I thought that he would just cut the cage off better than he did, and he didn't. And Tybura, I don't know what you do with him, and Ivanov, you put him against Lewis. There's just no one around Tybura that makes a lot of sense right now. Like, there isn't a young talent to give him the challenge. I guess you could do him and Jailton Almeida and do something else with Spivak. I guess that would work. But, or hell, a rematch with Derrick Lewis. But I'm not inclined to like love that fight. But hey, if my goal is to figure out if Derrick Lewis still has it, a rematch of a fight that he did win actually does make a lot of sense. Moving on down, Doo Choi versus Kyle Nelson ended in a draw because Choi got a point taken away for a headbutt in the third round. I'm mostly just going to talk about the headbutt because there's not a lot to talk about with the fight. It was just clear that Nelson was able to absolutely hurt Choi, but Choi is also way better. Which unfortunately was my thought on the dynamic going in, that unfortunately Doo Choi just doesn't have a defensively sound game anymore. He will get clipped. And if Kyle Nelson is clipping you, I don't really know what to do. As for the headbutt itself, a lot of people are angry about the point being deducted. There's something to be said that the referees tend to give a lot of warnings. There is something to be said for that, and that didn't happen here. He got pretty much point docked immediately. It wasn't a big deal, etc. But here's the thing. People are like, well, why would he get a point taken away? Like, he didn't bust Nelson open or anything. Yeah, but if he busts Nelson open, what's the point of taking a point? Because at that point, we're probably looking at our doctor stoppage. If it's bad enough. Like, if you've ever seen how bad clashes of heads and headbutts can get, it's pretty much a fight stoppage if it's as bad as these people wanted to be for a point deduction. So what's the point? And he definitely did headbutt Nelson. I'm not saying he meant to headbutt Nelson, but we can't go on intent because we can't see into the brain to watch the decision-making process. That's not something within our capabilities. And people are angry that he doesn't get a win out of this. Honestly, that might be for the better. Apparently, the UFC is going to pay him his win bonus anyway, so there's no financial component to that win that wasn't brought in, and they'll probably treat him like a winner. But my guy went out there, had a competitive fight with Kyle Nelson, who is bad, headbutted him, showed all of the defensive flaws, and the fact that I just don't think his chin is there anymore. For my next fight for him, I got nothing written there. I've got take time off and go find a new coaching team. Honestly, that's my honest opinion. Because his coaches have seen exactly what the problem is with him and have done nothing to address it. That he is still exceptionally hittable. And now that he's in his 30s, his durability is waning and his physicality is waning. I hate to be doom and gloom about it, but this will be pretty much the last time I get excited for Doo Ho Choi unless something changes. And for Nelson, I don't care. I was surprised he was still on contract. So, welcome to my incredibly boring matchmaking talk. And it will continue, to be honest. Yusaku Kinoshita versus Adam Fugit. I knew Fugit had it in him. Yes! My boy! Kinoshita does look really, really fast. He did hit Fugit a couple of times. But he got taken down. He got his back taken. He got mat returned. He didn't accept positions. Like, he would keep getting back up and whatever. But Fugit got him down, flattened him out, starts landing some GMP. Referee steps in. Boom. There you go. Adam Fugit, my boy. Well, I really shouldn't say my boy, but I did put some money on this one. And thank you. Cashing at a, what did I get him at? I got him at plus 260. So that was not a bad cash. And I kind of thought it like Kinoshita has a bright future. Dude is a super young fighter. He's got good power, good explosiveness, very fast, but there's just a lot missing that will just come with cage time. Like it's the whole fact that like he just hasn't had a long enough time, and that is a common refrain off of Dana White Contender Series is that you get a guy and he's got like 5-6 fights. I think he had 7, and they end up in the UFC and they're just not ready. And he will get ready. I have faith in that. But does anyone else want to see Fugit versus Angelosa? I was just looking through the rankings. I had never thought of that fight before, but it's appropriate, and I would love it. Kinoshita, I have penciled in here. Christian Aguilar, if he's still around, because that is the level of opponent that Kinoshita can gain useful experience from. Somebody who is still very deadly, still nasty, like still physically imposing, powerful hitter, etc., but is similarly very, very raw, and will just kind of give you looks and so on to sharpen. Iron sharpens iron, basically, with that one. Christian Aguilar is a whetstone. There you go. Anshul Jubli defeated Jeka Saragi. I don't care what's next with these guys. Saragi was just not very good. Not very good. Completely out of his element on his back. Got pounded out. I have not much more to say. I said in the I might have said in the predictions cast pod, I should say, and I'll say it here if I didn't say it then. I'm never really going to get excited for an India versus Indonesia. And here's the thing: it's not about India. It's not about Indonesia. But you put a fighter from a country that has no established mixed martial arts pedigree and that trains there versus a guy who also trains out of a country that has no real mixed martial arts pedigree, it's probably not gonna be great. That is the problem we live in. That there are like 12 to 15 countries, maybe 20 countries, maybe 20 countries in the world that honestly have the right ideas, the right training facilities to develop appropriate athletic fighters into top-notch MMA fighters. India, Indonesia, not currently those things. Nothing says that they can't be in the future, but not right now. And this fight was like a classic example of that. Jubli does look actually reasonably good. Like there's some physicality to him. We'll see what he does. But until I see him fight somebody that knows what they're doing, I don't really have an opinion on him. I'll probably be picking against him whoever he fights next, but I'll be willing to be surprised. Jia Li and Jung Lee, this was a clinch heavy, fence heavy thing, and the only thing really notable was that there was a moment where Yi had top position against Lee, and Lee kicked Yi with an illegal up kick, and Yi had to give up the position when they restarted. I didn't like that. That was really the only thing notable. I don't think that any of the 3 rounds I really thought either guy distinctly won, so Lee wins. I guess that's the better one because Jia Yi, the Chinese fighter, the guy who lost, is a like 27 fight veteran who doesn't really seem to have the upside physicality to really compete in the UFC. Like at no point did he feel like a UFC fighter. Lee does at least have good physical upside. Maybe something can be done with him. Keep training him, keep getting him better. He's very early in his career, very, very raw. But like he also kind of fits into like the Kinoshita mold where it's like the UFC doesn't generally do a great job of developing young fighters. Mostly because that's not what they're trying to do. But it kind of, at the same time, it confuses me that they sign guys like this and then generally just mishandle them. So my prediction for Lee, unfortunately, is he'll be in the UFC for a bit, however long this road to the UFC contract is. He'll probably show flashes of brilliance, flashes of promise in all of his fights, and then end up getting kicked to the curb when he just doesn't win. Especially in the, I think these guys were featherweights. Tough division. Rinya Nakamura versus Toshiomo Kazama was a great fight. Kazama went out there and was like, you know what? I'm going to try and piss in this guy's Wheaties, and got knocked out. Like, horrendously knocked out. But it was really, really, really fun to watch. I don't have an opponent for Kazama coming out of it because he said he was going to retire if he didn't win, and I am actually pro, like, once you start talking about retirement, I'm kind of pro you go walking away because it implies that I hope you've applied some thought to this, and realistically, I don't think he has the physicality to compete at a high level. I don't think he really has the training to compete at a high level. I like some of the things he does. He's kind of like a quirky fighter who does some sneaky good grappling things. Reminds me a lot of Keita Nakamura. But at the same time, Keita Nakamura's career didn't exactly make him rich. So if you've got options outside of fighting, Mr. Kazama, please pursue them. And for Nakamura, I've got Vince Morales penciled in here. Although this is another case of like Christian Aguilar. I don't actually know if Vince Morales is still on contract, but I think that would be appropriate. Just kind of like a tough, seasoned, put together fighter to see what you can do. Because I still have a lot of questions about Nakamura, but he is the one that I actually think might be the big find out of this whole road to the UFC thing. Hung Sik Park versus Sokut Choi. Rear naked choke submission for Park. Didn't really think all that much of this fight. There was like a Scott Hall special sack of shit takedown, though. That was kind of cool. Again, I don't care. The UFC doesn't build the flyweight division enough. Speaking of which, we're going to talk about the flyweight division later. But they don't build the flyweight division enough for these guys who need time to learn and develop to really do anything, because you're very quickly into like the top 15. And those guys will just run over you. Unless you're a super athlete. And I don't think Park is. Jung Young Park versus Dennis Tialunen. The Iron Turtle Jung Young Park made me proud here. You know, not much on the feet. Sure. Like very back and forward, very tit for tat. Gets a takedown. Takes the back. Threatens the neck. Gets mount. And then eventually pounds him out with like some, he actually, he rear naked choked him and put him to sleep. But like the ground and pound is what is really good. Like Jung Young Park is one of those few fighters who actually, I really think trains and details and has an idea for ground and pound that he makes use of. And it's really impressive to watch. if it wasn't for the fact that he's probably really a welterweight size guy who doesn't have the speed and athleticism of a welterweight, so he fights at middleweight, he would probably go really, really far because I think he's an incredibly well put together fighter. But he just has a physical ceiling. For his next fight, I have selected Bruno Ferreira. And for Tia Lunin, because I think he'll still be around, he's 1-2. What about Joseph Holmes? Because they both lost to the Iron Turtle, so they have that in common. There's a storyline. There's a through thread there. And I just don't think Holmes is very good, and I don't think Tia Lunin is very good, and it's for very, very different reasons, and it might amuse me to see them fight. Flyweight action, Tetsuya Taira, biggest favorite on the card. Immediate takedown. Jesus Aguilar worked for a submission with a guillotine. Taira goes to mount, locks up the mounted triangle, rolls to his back, secures the armbar, gets the verbal tap out. Beautiful performance, fantastic performance, amazing performance from Taira, who I am surprised the UFC is actually taking their time to build, especially in the very limited flyweight division. But it is also why you got to sign more people to keep to let this build, because Taira is putting together a lot of hype train off this. But at the same time, I kind of get it. I kind of get the idea that you put when you're directly competing with Bellator, because this fight and the Park fight were both on during the Bellator card on CBS. You put it on to try to take viewers away from it. But here's the thing. I honestly think the UFC trying to murder the competition actually just hurts MMA and hurts their overall product, because it means that the grounds in which people would get the seasoning that I'm talking about are slowly going away. Smart for the UFC, I guess. Keep that market share and allow you to do nothing, because the promotion for UFC 284, I'll talk about more tomorrow, has been bad. But it also positions a division that people don't really care about, because you've positioned it very poorly for a long, long time. I give you back to when Demetrius Johnson's defending his title against Chris Carriasso. Don't get me wrong. That's not an exciting fight. It's not a sexy fight. But what makes it even less sexy is people going, who the heck is Chris Carriasso? Because he's been fighting on Fight Pass prelims and then suddenly has a title shot, and you wonder why no one cares. And this is the same thing with Taira here. He should have been higher up in the card. This was a fight to look forward to. And flip it with Kinoshita versus Fugit. That's my honest opinion. Even the Jung Young Park fight was way too low, I guess. Although I guess he was against Dennis Thielu. I mean, I guess the B-sides here were very, very obvious, but still. For Aguilar, it's whoever they want to break in at flyweight. He's a physical force who's hard capped by the fact that he's short and has a really limited reach and kind of a limited game. But you know what? He's a tricky kind of Cody McKenzie, Jimmy Flick type guy. Excellent guy to welcome to the UFC. Here's a dude who's going to do some weird shit. How do you handle it? And for Tetsuya Taira, I've got Cody Durden as a step-up opponent. Bellator 290. All right, so I do have to crap on Bellator a little bit because I don't really understand this whole Paramount Plus CBS plus YouTube prelims or live on YouTube. It just feels like you're really just kind of missing the opportunity here, because you want CBS to put you on more, because CBS is the exposure. It's the mainstream exposure that you do need. You absolutely do need if you're ever going to really take the fight to the UFC or even survive. But you're putting it on all these places to get it for free, and it just dilutes the viewership numbers. So to me, that was rather poor. It's just a bad format. 3-fight main card, also a bit weird. But they picked 3 good fights to put up there. Ward Hamasi was great. The title fight, Eblen, try to get Eblen a little bit of hype. Give Fedor a send-off. And the only other thing I guess would be like some of the legends they had come out to do the Fedor thing. Really just don't have anything to do with Fedor, but it was still kind of cool. Let's talk about Johnny Eblen versus Anatoly Topkov. I scored the first round for Topkov. I know a lot of people didn't. They gave Eblen the clean sweep. I didn't think so. I thought that Topkov landed the harder shots, the bigger bombs, the cleaner stuff, and neither guy really got their wrestling engaged in the first round. And I also think that this is a normal thing for Johnny Eblen when I watch his fights, is Johnny Eblen takes a little bit to get locked in, to get calibrated to the speed of the opponent. He's a guy who looks like he definitely does his homework, does a lot of film study, breaks down a lot of tendencies of the opponent, a lot of the looks that they do, a lot of the entries they like to use, but it takes that 2 or 3 times of seeing it in the cage to get the speed locked in. So Topkov got his best work done in the first round, I thought he won the round, although I in no way thought that it was a great sign, because I always think Eblen is going to handle things, and he did, because he drops Topkov in the second round. He starts to take over, and then the third, the fourth, and the fifth round are just him doing his thing, getting the better of the striking, getting the takedowns, getting some mat returns. There was a big suplex at the end of the fifth round that was very, very cool. Made a statement on a fight that he was already winning. Kind of missed the opportunity, I think, to call out Luke Rockhold in the post-fight to try to get something going, because there's not much for him in this middleweight division, honestly. He is trying to do some promotion by talking about like being a nightmare matchup for Alex Pereira and whatever. I actually do think he is. Like, don't get me wrong. There's if you could take me now to a future time where Eblen is fighting Alex Pereira, and you drop me in mid-second round, I would confidently pick Eblen to win. Because I think at that point he'll have the calibrations in, he'll have the adjustments, and he'll start kind of doing the Alexander Volkanovski, only it's less impressive because it's against lower level competition, and get the job done. But there would be that scary moment, because he does tend to get clocked. Like, he got clocked pretty good early in this fight by Topkov. It's just, Topkov doesn't have one-punch KO power or anything. He just kind of messed up his eye. And Eblen retains his title, gets the job done. Sabah Hamasi versus Brendan Ward was sloppy, ridiculous fun. Ward actually looked for the takedowns a lot earlier than I thought he was. But the thing was, he also had like Hamasi hurt on the feet and would like go for takedowns and stuff, and like drop him and then think of the guillotine and then go for the GMP. Like, it was really, really, it was a really, really fun fight. But like, in no way does it paint Brendan Ward or Sabah Hamasi as like a high level tactician guy. And then Ward had kind of a cringy thing with Jean-Claude Van Damme afterwards. But I mean, if you've not seen this fight and you're like, oh, it's Bellator, I'm not gonna go check it out. It's fun, messy fun. It's not high level MMA, but it is fun as hell. I don't know if I could recommend the Eblen fight outside of as like an exploration of Johnny Eblen, who's a really, really good fighter. And I don't think you really need to go see the Bader versus Fedor fight. But off the main card, this is the fight that you probably should see. It's fun. It's sloppy as hell. It's very Brendan Ward. I still have no faith in him moving forward, but it is fun. It is ridiculously fun. Lorenz Larkin beat Muhammad Burkamov with a hell of a nice counter elbow strike. Again, another one that paid off for me. I had money on the underdog. I'm talking about the betting because I did some betting for a change. I treated myself for my birthday to some betting, and I'm a little bit amped about it because it worked out. I didn't honestly understand why Larkin was such a big underdog. Well, he wasn't a huge underdog or anything, but like, why Burkamov isn't impressive? Like, is it really that people's idea is like, this guy is from the Caucasus, Dagestan, Chechnya, etc., and therefore he is awesome because he is Habib? Because, I mean, Berkimov is a perfectly serviceable wrestler and whatever, but he's not physically terribly impressive. I'm sorry. Like, I don't really have anyone's faith in just bringing a single level dimensional attack on Larkin and actually having it work. And Larkin knocked him out. And I was very happy with that. Lorenz Larkin is awesome. By the way, Twitter was like pushing the idea of Larkin versus Brennan Ward. Don't get me wrong. That fight would be fun. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like you can get a fun fight with Brennan Ward against just about anyone. He just has that, he is a scrapper, dedicated scrapper. You don't need to do anything. Because Larkin can also give you high-level technical battles. And I'd love to see him in that. Like Larkin versus MVP, Michael Venom Page, actually might be fun. I say this is a guy who has found Michael Venom Page's career to be a complete waste of time. But this could be a fun fight. And Brennan Ward, you can do whatever. He has a feud going with Dalton Rasta. Let him do that. Henry Corrales versus Akhmed Magomedov. This was also really fun. This was really, really good. It was good to see Corrales come out here and really show up and do some things. Don't get me wrong, Magomedov had his moments. I thought he won the first round. He had some good train wrestling. He had takedowns, although Corrales was popping back up. He got some back take time. The back ride, I guess I'll call it, where you're like pushing the guy into the cage and you got it. A couple in your takedowns. So Corrales fought it off. And actually, Magomedov, not as sloppy of a boxer as I thought he was going to be. So, did some good things, but Corrales was eating up his leg, getting some things done at range. And the second and third round were very much defined by that. Corrales kept eating away at Magomedov's leg, kept fending off the takedowns, started landing a double jab where he would just throw out, he would do the dub, and Magomedov didn't really seem to have an answer for that. And he just kind of did his thing, landed some good counters, looked like he was a guy. And Magomedov ran all kinds out of gas with the leg kicks. Steve Mowry versus Ali Isaev ended in a draw. This is a night where we had two draws because we had the Nelson and Choi draw on the UFC card. And we had this one. Mowry is an excellent grappler. I really enjoy watching him grapple. The problem is this is also heavyweight, and he doesn't really have a great stand-up game, but he mauled Isaev in the second round. Was looking for an arm triangle, had prolonged mount, was working ground and pound, but it just didn't translate to the first or the second round because he couldn't get Isaev down, and he couldn't really control the stand-up, and got taken down, and actually was controlled for reasonably large sections of the round. So it's kind of one of those things. There's a lot of building blocks with Mowry. He's a 6'8" dude who actually seems incredibly coordinated and good at grappling, and that's exceptionally rare. So I'm still going to be interested in watching his progression, but there are some things we need. Max Roshkov, got deaded by Chris Gonzalez in a really scary way. He had a ragdoll physics moment where he got hit and his arm was trapped behind him and he face planted, and it was kind of concerning. It's kind of cool. Go back and check that out. Honestly, the prelims are really, really good because the Corrales versus Magomedov fight and the Larkin versus Berkhamov fight, both are worth a watch. This was worth a watch. Grant Neal versus Carl Albrechtsen wasn't really. It was highlighted by Neal doing a lot of wrestling, kind of just smothering Albrechtsen, who landed some nice low kicks and whatever, and was really, really happy with himself. And don't get me wrong, a fighter who comes out and wins a fight should be happy about themselves and whatever. It's a big moment. It's a big win for Neal. Legitimately it is. But he was... I hope that as we speak, Grant Neal has taken a moment to go back and watch the fight and realized that it wasn't particularly good from an entertainment standpoint, and it wasn't particularly good from a problem-solving standpoint. And I hope he gets better. Diana Avsagorova versus Alejandra Lara ended in a split decision win for Avsagorova. She won the first round, I thought, pretty easily. She had like some really, really, really good counters. Like she had Lara very, very well studied. Like she knew when Lara came in that she could pretty much counter at will with the right hand. I think she just ran out of gas in the long run, though, because when Lara just like was like, I refuse to stop at the counter. I'm going to eat the counter. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep making this messy. Avsagorova wasn't able to keep up and lost the third round. Second round was a toss-up. I scored it for Lara. Therefore, I gave the fight to Lara. But I have no problem with Avsagorova winning this fight. She did miss weight, though, so maybe that played a role. Maybe like the bad weight cut was the key to her not having a great outing. We'll see. Now, judging I didn't agree with. I went back and watched Darian Caldwell versus Nikita Mikhailov fight. I also went back and watched the Lara versus Avsagorova fight because I missed those because I was doing some esports commentary. I don't get how Caldwell lost this fight. I will say that like this fight was everything wrong with Caldwell's style. There were points where he very much was John Fitching it. I'm on top. I'm just going to hold position. I'm going to keep you from doing anything, but like I'm not really going to do much. And in this damage-based criteria, that's going to cost him fights, but it should not have cost him this one. And the reason I say this is because both in the first and the second round, Caldwell got back control and worked really close for a rear naked choke. Like a very legitimate fight possibly ending rear naked choke in both the first and the second round. And no, I don't believe you should actually reward empty volume. And what I mean by empty volume is picture Caldwell on Mihailov's back. And Mikhailov throwing his right hand over his left shoulder to try to hit him with a punch or a hammer fist. That, I think, is what the judges literally rewarded here because they made a big deal about him landing like twice as much. Like the commentary was really prepping us for this terrible judging moment of throwing punches with no impact and therefore no damage behind it. I also scored the third round for Caldwell, but I have no problem giving the call. Like they both didn't do anything to win the third round, so like fine, if that's Mihailov's round, that's Mihailov's round. But I don't know, and it was a unanimous decision too. That was a robbery of a fight card, and some like non-traditional robbery judges involved. So hey, we're getting new judges, but it's not necessarily solving the problem. Again, I've said this before. What would I like to see happen here? I would like those three judges, one of which was Chris Lieben, to have to go and explain it. Like, did I miss something? Are you not just rewarding empty punches from bottom? Is that what we're rewarding? Because if that's the rules, okay, fine, whatever. And don't get me wrong, I actually think that this is kind of a similar situation to like the Choi fight, where like I do agree that Choi would have won the fight if not for a point deduction, but the draw might send him back to the drawing board to like improve his style. It's kind of the same thing here because Caldwell losing this fight and his corner being very unhappy with his performance probably actually will lead to more useful changes in his game. I hope that's the case. All right. Below, to the left, to the right, or above, you will see a Linktree link and a bunch of other links too, to where you can consume this podcast on your platform of choice, where you can engage with me on social media, and my Discord server. Now, why do I bring up the Discord server? Well, it's because, one, there's some cool MMA talk going on there, kind of at all times. And two, there is a mixed martial arts sim that I think if you've gotten to this point in the podcast, you would enjoy. You would enjoy the little hybrid RPG with MMA mechanics that go on there. So check it out. I would love to have you there, and have a lovely day wherever you are.